systems or designs affect people's health, how it affects their disability. Does it work for a global audience? Does it help new people come to the internet and elderly people? So I've become very interested in this global perspective on UX. And where I come from in Europe, and more specifically Denmark, we have an aging population. So people live longer, and we don't really make babies anymore. So a lot of people who are actually supposed to use our websites, such as hospital websites that I'm working with right now, they are in their 80s and they still use websites and apps, but it takes some reflection to make a website that's good for them. And then in the developing world, as Tisray said, 1 billion people are going to be joining the internet over the next years. And those are people who don't have a lot of IT skills like we have. They've never seen a computer, they will never own a tablet, but they might get a mobile phone, and so suddenly they can have a bank account, and they can use certain health apps and so on. And what's interesting to me is that all these different perspectives, when we look at how we design to make these sites or apps accessible to people, the guidelines are actually the same, whether you are designing for elderly people or for people who are kind of new to computers. So I come from Copenhagen in Denmark, where we have a long tradition of design, as you can see here from the Viking ages. And in Copenhagen we have the world's first designer hotel. The architects actually designed the furniture. And in the UX world, I'm not sure if you're aware of it, but we have Dr. Nielsen, Jacob Nielsen is Danish. So if you're wondering where did I hear this peculiar accent before, it might be Nielsen. However, when it comes to designing websites, we're still lacking. So I run a company called Copinox. We do usability testing, user research, task analysis, and also prototyping and so on. So we do a lot of usability testing. And when we average all the results for usability testing, the task completion rate is actually only 67%. So that means if we give users a task on a website, one third of the time they will fail. Less than half of the time they'll do what they're supposed to do in their first attempt. Many times, 18% of the time, they have to try several times. Let's see, 24% of the time they have to give up, and in 9% of the time they think they did the right thing, they think they found the right information or signed up for something, but they didn't, or they found the wrong answer. So there's room for improvement, and maybe we should have listened more to Dr. Nielsen anyway. So we also looked at what's actually causing the problems, and the elephant in the room is information architecture, navigation, structure, that accounts for 48% of all usability problems, all the problems users have. And embarrassingly, visual design was actually supposed to enhance the UI, is responsible for 23% of all usability usability problems because a button doesn't look like a button or something like that. Then there's functionality, content, search, and a few other things. So, in fact, the problems we're facing for even mature websites are actually very basic usability problems. And after 10 years as a UX consultant, it gets kind of boring to look at the same kinds of problems when you could actually have just referred to some guidelines or general principles that would tell you to make elements very noticeable on the screen. So often we see, so there's 10 users and there's this element that's essential for the page, and they look at the page, they scroll up and down, and none of them can find it. And of course, as UX designers, we can often spot, that's because it's in the right-hand column, or it's designed in a way that doesn't look like a button, or wording is wrong. A lot of the times we see something that I think is very basic, that a link doesn't look like a link, or an interactive element doesn't appear to be interactive. That's a huge problem. And then, of course, we should always use the user's language instead of our own terminology, branding, and stuff. So, a few examples. I have some examples from South Africa, but let's just see an example from Denmark. This is the main weather service in Denmark. They recently redesigned their website. This is the mobile version of the website, and people just hate it. There's a war going on social media, and they've been in the traditional media as well. And now, it's 2 weeks after they relaunched this project, they are redesigning their website again. So what you can do here is actually you can see how the weather is. Have any of you ever used an app to see how the weather is right now? You have? Yeah. You don't just look out the window? So you're in bed and you really don't bother to get up and look out the window to see what weather. So okay, a few people have any other scenarios, or why you would use a weather app?
Well, I also want to, let's say you're traveling down to the Cape or somewhere else, and you'd like to know what to pack in. So shopping for warm clothes and cold clothes.
Oh yeah, yes. So how it will be in another place, and in a few days, maybe, yeah, right. Yes. So in order to find out, so what people in Denmark are criticizing is that in the old design that looked awful, but you could always see how the weather would be like in the weekend, and so on. So in order to do that, you have to scroll down, then you can see how the weather will be in an hour or in 2 hours, and then you have to scroll further down, and you can see how the wind is and when the sun sets and so on. And then there's one of these links that don't look like link, where you can press, and then you can see what's the weather going to be in the weekend. Whereas the competitor on the first page, you can actually see what the weather is now, how it will be later in the day, and a few days from now. So, and of course, this is what we call interaction cost. You can see the coming weather for the coming days but you have to do a lot of scrolling and clicking to get it where, in this example, it's already there. So that's a very basic, one of the very basic things. Another problem we see is, as I said, do interactive elements actually look interactive? Do they look clickable? So this is the Copenhagen Business School, and I actually think on the first screen they did a really good job because it's very simple. So the blue element, you can click the blue elements, and you cannot click on the black elements. So they already taught me what are the rules of this website, but once you scroll down, it kind of continues. You cannot click here, you can click here, they are blue, but you can actually also click here. So already on the second screen, there's some confusion because now they broke down the rules, they're not consistent. And on the next screen, when you actually click the main story, you come into this, you can click here, you cannot click here, and the only logic, you would be able to click, you should be able to click here, but you can't. So here we have a link that doesn't look like a link, and something that looks like a link but isn't, which is very nice. Okay, are you ready for an example for South Africa? Right, so I was in Cape Town this weekend. The weather was very nice. So we also went to a vineyard and looked at a lot of them. So this looks very nice, and maybe you would like to actually dine there. Let's see. Oh, they have a menu. That's nice, but it turns out they mean something else by menu than actual users, including me. I know what a navigational menu is, but because in this situation I'm just a hungry user who wants to get my task done. So these are some of the, so I actually made money by printing simple stuff like that. Which is fun for about 7-8 years, and then you kind of think of some improvement. I think we should get over this because it's quite simple to make links blue and everything is black, and then a few extra colors. These are all avoidable problems. They're very well known, but. So what I find interesting now is that if we get past these very banal problems by designing our websites in the right way, we actually, or even in the wrong way, we affect people's health in many ways. People use computers and phones so much so that what we do actually affects their health. So some things are not easy to, you have to research to know. But parallel scrolling, when you scroll down and the image is fixed in the background and everything else scrolls. But people will have emotions with sensitivity, so people who get car sick, they'll actually can actually get ill by seeing parallel scrolling. So that's one thing we should try to avoid, because it's not really that cool. People there's a wow effect. The first, if you do usability testing, it has some kind of wow effect the first 10 seconds, and after that people get kind of tired and just need to do that task. There are other ways of making design cool. But then there's actually things so people nowadays are online about 1/3 of their waking time. So little movements are not small movements are not a problem in themselves, but when you do it like for hours and hours, and we pick up our phone 200 times a day, it adds up, and it puts strain on your arm, and also how hard it is to read the contrast on the side. So a few examples. I've put this product into my shopping cart, and I try to click here because it kind of looks clickable, but it's not. But in order to actually go to my shopping cart, I have to move the mouse all the way across the screen up here. So why can't I just click here? And of course, in isolation, that's a very small problem. But if every website just put a little more strain than necessary on our arms, at some point it actually hurts. And the same goes for the eyes. So obviously we often talk about high contrast, but actually I don't know if you can see it here, but if you go to the Washington Post, they have a very light gray background and then black text. What designers often do is make the text gray and then white background, which is very straining on the eyes. But this actually relaxes the eye. It has to be gray and not light blue or light red or something. But that's a really nice little thing that actually makes a difference when you read and when your eyes are tired, and you can read longer if the design doesn't. I should add, if you have questions or need clarification, you're very welcome. We'll take questions afterwards, but you're welcome to interrupt. So what really fascinated me is that sustainability is actually something that we can influence by the way that we design. And actually, Tim Frick wrote a book about it, Designing for Sustainability, 2 years ago, and it's actually a very, very good book. It has many specific guidelines on it. So one thing we can do is only use system fonts. If a website uses web fonts, it takes electricity to get the font. And if it's just one website, it's not a problem, but if millions of websites do that, it's actually a huge problem. If the internet was a country, it would be number 6 on the list of countries that uses the most electricity. So so just because it's so huge, we can actually influence it. And keep printer-friendly pages simple, or maybe keep them in black and white. Don't add buttons or social icons and so on. So I often find that when I try to print even a short newspaper article, sometimes I get 25 pages. I'm not even exaggerating, of ads and comments and icons that I can't click on paper. And you might say, well, do people print nowadays? Yeah, when we do user research and when you come to the really important stuff, people choosing an education, people choosing expensive products, business scenarios, they actually do print. So it will make a difference. And then maybe the most important thing is that we can, if we can make content easy to find on the first attempt. So if people have to try several times. Each time they want to find a product or some information on our website. Yeah, it takes more electricity, and it's not as sustainable. So this is one of our projects. This is municipality. They run. They have some health services that the public can use, but the general practitioner has to sign them up for these services. And we did user research with the doctors, and what they told us is that we have a very limited time with the patient. We have 10 minutes, basically, and in 10 minutes we have to listen to them, what's the problem, try to come up with a diagnosis, take a blood test maybe, and then maybe have 1.5 minutes afterwards. So you have diabetes or something. Would you like to participate in this class instruction or meeting that the municipality officers will? So after that, doing that user research, we decided we wouldn't use a traditional menu. We would just put every category on the home. And the doctors were extremely happy with this. So on this side, you can actually find anything in just 2 clicks. And when we tested this with users for the first time ever, we had this 100% task completion. Everybody could find everything every time on the first attempt, and that's obviously good for the practitioners and the patients, but it also saves energy. You don't have to click 3 times and then go back to the home page, try something else, do a search. And the people who wrote the book actually developed a search engine as well called EcoGo. And you can enter your own website here, and you can get a sustainability health check. So randomly I chose and this one came up at the Department of Environmental Affairs of South Africa. And I checked how sustainable that website is. And they got an incredible score of 26 out of 100. But it's a cool service, and I think you can actually use this as a metric in your company, how sustainable are we? And then you have some other metrics for usability and findability and conversion and what have you. But you very easily can use this as well. And you not only get a score, but you actually get a full report from them, where you can see how are you doing on different parameters. They don't use Flash. They got that. All right. But isn't that amazing that we can actually improve sustainability by just designing different things. So globalization, of course, any project we do, or probably you guys do, in the beginning we will find out who is the target audience. But the thing is, whatever we do, at some point, people from another country or part of the world will be using our website. So how can we design for that? And of course, many companies have websites all over the world, but tend to design it in a way that reflects the country they come from. So there's also a full book of this, and also freely available guidelines on that. One important thing is to avoid issues with first names and last names that are different across the world. So in Chinese culture, your family name comes first. If you are Tamil, you don't have a last name. So that's what you fill in the form. And then the address form, yeah?
Sorry, so rather than having first name and last name, we'd have full name? Or
Yeah, just name.
Or just
Yeah,
name?
yeah, that's actually the guideline. And it helps everybody because suppose you have a middle name. I have actually tried that. I don't have a middle name, but my colleague has. So when I tried to reserve a plane ticket for her, I admit in my mental model of names, it's kind of part of the last name, the family name, but not in the airlines. You only have one last name. Yeah. So I actually, I didn't figure it out after she told me. So it solves a lot of problems that you just have to deal with. You've probably all tried to buy something on the internet, but then you cannot complete the last part of the form because you don't live in the US state. And then so if I'm called Bo, I'm called Bo, and you have this O/thing, and I don't know how many forms where they just mark everything with red and splashes error messages all over because and sometimes, and that's the best case scenarios, because sometimes they don't even do anything. I just can't, they just display some random error message because they have never thought of this problem. So let's just look at a form here that says, that has this first name, last name. And of course, you have to consider, do you really need that? Maybe you do need first name if you want to say, hi, John, in your newsletter, or maybe airlines actually need a last name too. But if a Chinese or Korean person, for instance, Kim Jong-un, would fill in this form, there would be some confusion because is it Jong-un? It's actually the first name, and Kim is the family name, but some would probably adjust to Western culture and put it the other way around, and so it creates confusion. And then there's a very interesting article that Okri from Uganda, I believe, wrote this. That this form, I believe it's a WordPress template, is responsible for e-commerce failing in Africa, because there has to be a street address and maybe an apartment suite, city, zip code, and so on. But in many countries, addresses don't work that way. I was in Mumbai a few years ago taking a course, and we didn't get an address. We got kind of this part of town over the bridge across this river and behind the green building near something else. And when we gave that to the taxi driver, he was just, okay. That's how addresses work in many countries. So we need some flexibility and not just use a standard. Some of you probably have seen this. There was a campaign last year somewhere that a lot of South African names are not recognized by any kind of a lot of software. So again, you made an error. No, I spent money. So it's actually, I think it's actually important. So if we want to have a make a good impression on people, we actually have to signal to them that we know who they are. We have to signal to them that they're welcome, and we know how things work in their countries. All right. So when you become older, motor control, cognitive abilities, memory decreases. And in European countries, people are now required to work longer until they can retire at age 70 or something now. And a lot of government services has, if you want to apply for subsidies for housing or sign up for education or whatever, see your medical record and so on, it's actually required that you do it online. But it's harder. Things like that is it's harder when you're older. So we have to take that into account as well. Also, I was telling you about business software. So if in a few years a lot of a big part of the workforce will be in their 60s, it's also a little bit harder for them to do it. And I've seen people in their 80s use websites, and it's actually very, very hard for them to do basic things like scrolling. So there's also a book on that, designing user interfaces for an aging population. I really recommend it because it's very specific on how to design for this particular audience. You have to make click targets big. It's very hard to if your hand is shaking a little bit, it's harder to hit a small link, for instance. And if you see a list of 10 pages in the search results, it's more difficult to remember. Was that the page I was at before? Have I clicked this already? So they might the links you've already clicked need to be marked. And then maybe the big one, present one thing at a time, because elderly people are often, it's not that they can't use computers, they are actually quite advanced, many of them, but they get overwhelmed. They look at this interface where you're in big form and explanations, and you have to scroll, and they're like, oh, no, my nephew or something. Oh, no, it's my grandchild or something. So they are overwhelmed by it. So one very nice example of this is GovUK in the UK. I don't know if you know it here. It's kind of the whole thing in Europe. What they've done is put as many government services on one site, and they do a lot of user research and testing. So let's say you're from South Africa and you want to check if you need a visa to go to the UK. That can be very complicated in some countries. But here you may need a visa to come to the UK to visit, study, or work. Start now. And on the next page, there's only one drop-down menu with all the countries in the world. And you choose South Africa, and then there's the next step. So what are you coming to the UK to do? Tourism, study, get married, get private medical treatment or whatever. Let's say I say tourism, and I was traveling with or visiting either your partner or a family member in the UK, and I can say yes or no. If I say no, I get the answer, you need a visa to come to the UK. Apply for a standard visitor visa. So that's actually very easy for the rest of us as well, because you are asked one question at a time, not 5 questions at a time. So what they have some principles, and what they've done here is do the hard work to make it simple for users, and compare that to Denmark. Who needs a visa? And then we tell people all the rules, and we also tell them that Denmark is a member of EU and EEA, and this applies also for Swiss citizens. Many things, and Turkey has special rules for Turkish citizens and people from Moldova and what have you. So a lot of information that I mean, lawyers have to learn this, but someone who just wants to come to Denmark to see Little Mermaid shouldn't have to learn all this stuff. And when you're done with this, you can see the list of countries with visa requirements. And then we have a page with all the countries in the world, in different categories, and you can try and find South Africa there. All right. So, designing for elderly people will actually benefit everybody, and hopefully we'll all become very old at some point. And then there's development. These key guidelines are from an NGO from Nigeria called eHealth Africa. They do a lot of health apps and do a lot of other health-related work, especially in Western Africa. And they did user research in one of the northern Nigerian states that's really detailed and fascinating. Ali Lam, she has a video on YouTube. The link is down there. So obviously you have to know the context. You don't in this environment you don't suck up battery life for no good reason. So people who get the first mobile phones, they may not have power in their house. Some of them have to walk several kilometers to charge their phones. So the apps and whatever they're using, it has to be really simple. And then this next billion people who will be joining the internet, they will be from places like rural India or sub-Saharan Africa. So that's where the growth is. But these people are not used to computers that actually may not have seen a computer at any time. And even if they get a mobile phone, they're not really interested in it. They're more interested in checking their health or doing something with their bank account and so on. So if you haven't seen a computer before or a web page before, it doesn't occur to you to scroll. So everything important has to happen in the first screen. And here we have the guideline again, make things that can be pressed look like they can be actually pressed. So here's the video that it's a full talk that I would encourage you to see. And what struck me was we had just done usability testing for Parliament, and their audience is lawyers and very well-educated people who grew up with computers, but they had, they had some of the same problems that people in northern Nigeria who got the first mobile phone ever